You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk. And I have to start with the NBA. No, not the All-Star game. I am proud to say that I didn't watch a second of it. I watched News of the World instead, the new Tom Hanks movie. It was okay. Not great. Not terrible. But a much better use of my time than watching a glorified exhibition that shouldn't have been happening in the first place. No, the reason that I'm bringing up the NBA is because the Nets are trying to build the Death Star. If it wasn't already built after the Harden trade, they're going to say that it's built now with the signing of Blake Griffin. On Friday, I said that I didn't want Griffin to go to the Nets. I knew it was a possibility, but I didn't want it to happen. I didn't think Griffin fit the Nets. I didn't think he filled any of their holes. You want to tell me that the James Harden trade didn't fill any of the Nets' holes either, and you raved about that? James Harden was an all-star this year. James Harden is one of the 5 best players in the NBA. Blake Griffin wouldn't even crack my top 50. In fact, I don't even know if he'd crack my top 100. When you're dealing with just an average player, and that's all Griffin is at this stage, an average player, you need to look at fit. Super duper stars, fit doesn't matter. You make that work. Average players, fit matters. What do the Nets need? They need really good defenders, and they need rebounders. Blake Griffin is none of those things. All Blake Griffin is, at this stage of his career, is just an average stretch 4. He's an excellent passer. He's always been a really good passer. But you're not going to see any highlight reel dunks. You're not going to see him jumping over a Kia. You're not going to see the crazy athletic Blake Griffin. No. You're going to see just an average stretch 4 with below average athleticism, to put it lightly, and an excellent passer. The Nets have excellent passers. James Harden is a phenomenal passer. Kyrie Irving's a good passer. Kevin Durant is a good passer. The Nets have passers. Why did they need Blake Griffin? You know how many dunks Blake Griffin has attempted in the past 2 seasons? 5. All of them came last year. Blake Griffin played in 20 games this year. He hasn't attempted a single dunk. The people going nuts over this signing are getting obsessed with the name. Yeah, Blake Griffin's a sexy name. 6-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA player, former first overall pick. I'm pretty sure he was the last cover athlete of NCAA basketball. He won Rookie of the Year his sophomore season. Blake Griffin's a really fun name. Pairing him up with DeAndre Jordan again. Fun. That's all he is. He's a name. You want to talk about being a shell of your former self? That describes Blake Griffin to a T. Now, I don't know how quickly you're going to see Blake Griffin. Realize, he hasn't played in a while. The Pistons were making him inactive because they were trying to trade him or figure out what they were going to do with him. This guy hasn't played since February 12th. I'd be surprised if you saw Griffin right away. You see how cautious the Nets are being with Durant? They're going to be cautious with Griffin too. Maybe not to the level that they are with Durant, but they'll be cautious. Adrian Wojnarowski said that the Nets view Griffin as a small ball center. And the Nets love going small. It's part of what plays into their rebounding issue. Because they're so small, if the other team has a 7-footer on the court, yeah, he's going to get all the rebounds. Can Griffin work as a small ball center? The answer is yes. Okay, that idea makes sense. Griffin is someone who you do need to respect from beyond the arc. Can you live with him taking a shot? The answer is yes, but it's not like Andre Roberson where you know he's not going to hit it. This year from 3, Griffin has hit 31.5% of his shots. So he can make them. He just doesn't make them with great regularity. Now I'll say this, in the 18-19 season, Griffin's first full year with the Pistons, he completely reinvented his game. Shot more threes, he hit over 36% of them, had a career high in points per game. That was his last All-Star season. There's some Nets fans saying, okay, if we're not going to get Lob City Griffin, maybe we can get 18-19 Griffin. No, you're not going to get that. That was an aberration. I don't know what got into Griffin that year, but you've got to give Dwayne Casey a ton of credit for what happened that year. Griffin obviously gets credit too, but Casey really let him go. You want to shoot threes? Fine. We're going to draw plays for you where you're a stretch 4. You see how good the Nets are when they have Jeff Green as the small ball 5, Durant as the small ball 5. They even did it with Bruce Brown a little bit. You put Griffin into that role, it does make sense. But again, this goes back to the Nets have guys with a similar skill set to Griffin. I just named you 3 very capable small ball centers. Why add a 4th? I mean, here's the thing. When the Nets go small, it exacerbates their lack of defensive prowess. Now, Billy Reinhart tweeted something that I thought was very smart. He said, and I quote, "Nets have punted on investing in defensive personnel. It's about overwhelming opponents with talent, skill, and IQ. The early results seem to indicate it's working." Everything that he said there was 100% right. How can you win if you're giving up 120 points a game? The answer is you score 130. I mean, I understand the logic of overwhelming teams with offense. The Nets have done it very well. It's what's gotten them just a half game behind the Sixers for top seed in the East. But I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't a little bit concerned about the Nets' porous defense. Season ends today. They're playing the Hornets. They will beat the Hornets. There's no question about that. But Gordon Hayward and Terry Rozier are going to have games where they look like the second coming of Michael Jordan and Steph Curry. If they go up against Giannis, you know he's going to go off. If they go up against Embiid, he may go off. Tobias Harris could go off. Ben Simmons could go off. There's a lot of risk in forsaking defense for offense. It's why I wanted Andre Drummond a lot more than I wanted Blake Griffin. And I'll say this, I saw some people saying, "How dare you criticize Sean Marks? This is the guy who got Durant, he got Kyrie, he traded for Harden. He's infallible. No one loves Sean Marks more than me. Whatever Sean Marks is getting paid, it's not enough. The guy should get a lifetime contract with the Nets." But I'm still a fan of the team. I still have a right to criticize them. Look, I'm not slamming my fist on the table and saying, "There's no way this works, this is a terrible move, what are the Nets doing?" I understand the idea of Griffin as a small ball 5. It can work. Yeah, Sean Marks knows a lot more about basketball than I do. No question. But nobody's perfect. Marks has made mistakes. Trading for Alan Crabb. Trading for Jahlil Okafor. No one's infallible. Sure, Griffin can work. No question. But I'd be lying to you if I said I was 100% confident in it. That's all it is. I don't hate this move. By any stretch. Blake Griffin was signed to a minimum salary deal. I can't kill that. But there were better players that were going to become available. Much better fits. And now I have to root for a guy who I've said in the past that I don't like. Oh man, that's tough. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And I'll start with the last big domino of MLB free agency falling. That, of course, is Jake Odorizzi, who signed a 2-year deal with the Astros worth a maximum of $30 million. We don't have the exact terms of the contract, but we know it's 2 years, a player option for the third, and Odorizzi has a chance to make $30 million. Regardless of how much Odorizzi actually ends up making, this is a fantastic move for the Astros. It makes perfect sense. As much as it kills me to say it, this is a great move for him. The Astros rotation is extremely banged up. Justin Verlander's going to be out for like 90% of the year. Framber Valdez may need season-ending surgery because he has a fractured left ring finger. Austin Pruitt's a little banged up. Forrest Whitley could need Tommy John surgery. The Astros were the second best team in the American League last year. They're not going to keel over and die. They know that a rotation of Greinke, McCullers, Javier, Urquidy, and Blank isn't going to get the job done. If you replace that Blank with Odorizzi, that's a solid rotation. That's a rotation that can contend for the AL West. I'm not saying they're gonna win it. I do think the Athletics are gonna win the AL West, but the Astros are gonna make the Athletics work. Having said that, though, Odorizzi is no sure thing. He only started 4 games last year. He went 0-1 with a 6.59 ERA. He got hurt. Can he get hurt again? The answer is yes. But before last year, he was incredibly durable. Since 2014, he had made at least 28 starts all those years. In 2019, he made the All-Star team. He went 15-7 with a 3.51 ERA. Odorizzi is probably the third best starter on the Astros right now. They have to be counting their blessings that a guy like Odorizzi was still available after Valdez and Whitley got hurt. This is a fair contract for him. Odorizzi's going to make no more than $15 million per year. That's a very fair contract for someone who was arguably the second best pitcher in free agency behind Trevor Bauer. Some people would put Stroman ahead of him. Some people would put Gausman ahead of him. It's tough. And even then, those two guys accepted the qualifying offers. So they never really hit free agency. Odorizzi was by far and away the second best starting pitcher to actually hit free agency. So to pay him at most $15 million a year is very reasonable. Job well done by the Astros. Moving on now to the Giants signing Jose Alvarez to a 1-year deal worth $1.15 million. He also has a club option for 2022 worth $1.5 million. And this is a great move by the Giants. If you'll recall, I called for the Yankees to sign Alvarez. I wanted a low-leverage lefty. They went with Justin Wilson. Wilson's fine, don't get me wrong, but I liked Alvarez. Alvarez last year had a 1.42 ERA in only 8 games. he got hit by a line drive in the one place that you really don't want to get hit with a line drive. So, it's not like this guy is injury prone. That was just a fluky thing. In 2019, he went 3-4 with a 3.36 ERA. He's a very good lefty. Quite honestly, he's one of the better lefty relievers in the game. He's one of the most underrated players in baseball. The fit is a little confusing just because the Giants have a bunch of lefties already. Jake McGee, Caleb Barragar, Wandy Peralta, and Sam Selman. Did they need to add another lefty? The answer is no. But again, in this coronavirus climate, you can never have too much depth. Injuries happen all the time anyway. You can never have too much pitching. Yeah, it's not the greatest fit in the world for Alvarez, but I can't begrudge the Giants for adding a really good lefty reliever. Good job by them. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Valk talk. And I'll start with a Lions quarterback being on the trading block, according to Adam Schefter of ESPN. No, it's not Matthew Stafford. He was traded to the Rams. And it's not Jared Goff. It's Chase Daniel. The Lions have had trade discussions about Chase Daniel, the most coveted quarterback in NFL history, to not do a single thing in the league. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that Chase Daniel could actually be a legitimate starting option. Remember when the Eagles signed him? There were a lot of people saying that he could start over Carson Wentz. There were people saying that he could start over Mitchell Trubisky before the 2018 season. Chase Daniel has accomplished nothing in the NFL. Yet every year people talk him up, and some teams look at him as a legitimate option. Look, Daniel's a solid backup. He's a good backup. There's no question. When Daniel has been forced to start, he hasn't embarrassed himself. The last start he had was October 6th, 2019, when the Bears were playing the Oakland Raiders. Daniel went 22 for 30 for 231 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. The Raiders beat the Bears by a score of 24-21. Outside of the third quarter, the Bears got shut out. I just don't understand what people see in him. Again, he's not a bad quarterback. There's a role for him in the league. He's a good backup. There is no question. But to trade for a backup quarterback when there are always good backups in free agency? Guys like Tyrod Taylor, maybe Ryan Fitzpatrick, depending on whether he retires or not. Andy Dalton, CJ Beathard, or Joe Flacco? You're telling me you'd actually give up an asset to trade for Chase Daniel? Chase freaking Daniel. A guy who has only started 5 games in the NFL. If it was Marcus Mariota, I could accept it. At least Mariota has substantial starting experience and has won a playoff game. Chase Daniel has none of that. No team should trade for Chase Daniel. Not because he's a bad player. He's not. Solid backup. But you can find those in free agency. And if you're really going to make the argument that Chase Daniel can start, may God have mercy on your soul. In another report, Schefter said that the Chargers are shopping Trey Turner. It makes perfect sense for the Chargers to want to trade Turner. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how could the Chargers be willing to trade Turner? They have the young quarterback in Justin Herbert. You need to protect him. What are they doing? The reality is, though, Turner had a terrible season last year. He only played in 9 games, and according to Pro Football Focus, he had a 34.8 overall grade. A far cry from the perennial Pro Bowler that he was for the Panthers. I think it's safe to say that the Panthers won that trade. Even though Okung didn't play in a full season's worth of games either, he had a 73 overall grade. More than double Turner's grade. I have no problem with the Chargers looking to trade him. I'm not giving up on him. I could see a team looking to him as a buy low candidate. I'll give you like a 5th round pick for him and I'll try to fix him. The Chargers would probably do that. That's the highest I'd go for Turner. He can be fixed. I just don't think the Chargers can be the team to do it. Moving on now to the Bills, extending Micah Hyde for 2 more years at $19.25 million. He is now tied to the Bills through 2023, and this is a really good move for the Bills. A lot of what made the Bills' defense so great last year was their secondary. Jordan Poyer, with his drop-dead gorgeous wife, was one of those reasons. Tre'Davious White was obviously a big reason. Josh Norman, towards the end of the season, was a big part of that. Micah Hyde was right there with him. According to Pro Football Focus, last year he had a 68.7 overall grade. That's really good. I'll take that in a heartbeat. This isn't an overpay by any stretch. He's not breaking the bank. in terms of contracts for safeties. In fact, he's not even that far ahead of Poyer. So this move makes perfect sense. Fantastic job by the Bills. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come. Moving on now to the Texans, signing Justin Britt to a 1-year deal worth $3.2 million. It can max out at $5 million, though. And if this doesn't convince Deshaun Watson to come back, I don't know what will. Hey, look, we released your longtime center, a guy who you had a really good relationship with, but we replaced him with a guy who played 8 games in 2019 and didn't play at all last year. Come back, Deshaun. Oh, they are screwed. They are screwed. I mean, I don't get this. It's nothing against Britt. Okay, Britt's a solid center. In 2019 and 2018, for that matter, he had a 62 overall grade. Solid center when healthy. No one's disputing that. But why release Nick Martin for him? On what planet is Justin Britt a better starting center than Nick Martin? It's not like the Texans were in cap hell or anything. As it stands right now, not counting the Britt signing, the Texans are at just under $17 million in cap space. There was literally no good reason for them to move on from Martin and replace him with Justin Britt. Britt will be fine. There's no question. There's just no universe where he's a better option for the Texans than Martin. This move makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Moving on now to the Bills, locking up Andre Smith for 2 more years at $3 million. And this is a solid move for the Bills. Smith is a good special teamer, 67.5 overall grade. If you look at his defensive grade, it was 63.7. Granted, he didn't play much defensively, only 47 snaps. But still, it seems like there's something there. In the last game of the season, with the Dolphins playing for something, Smith stepped up. He had an 89.7 overall grade. He had 5 tackles. Brandon Beane obviously knows him from his days with the Panthers. Smith is a fine backup, fine special teamer. The contract is really fair. Good job by them. Moving on now to a report from Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated that says that the Eagles are discussing a Brandon Brooks trade. Zach Ertz also seems like he's going to be on the move soon. I'm pretty sure I talked about him already, so I'll focus on Brooks. I understand that the Eagles are in cap hell. At this very moment, they're $34 million over the cap. But trading Brooks really doesn't move the needle a lot. I understand that every little bit helps, but you're only saving $2.3 million. And you're talking about giving up one of the best right guards in football. For an offensive line that was absolutely porous last year, you're going to trade one of your best members of it? And an established veteran who won a Super Bowl? You're going to make a fractured locker room that much more fractured. Jalen Hurts is going to have the same issue as Carson Wentz. A report came out today that said that Jeffrey Lurie wants to give Hurts the starting job. He wants to build around Hurts, not give him competition. How does trading Brandon Brooks do that? Look, he missed all of last year. And he's going to be 32 when the season starts. I get that. But in 2019, he had a 92.8 overall grade. It was the best season of his career, according to Pro Football Focus. It was also his best run blocking year. His run blocking grade was 91.4. Also, who are you going to replace him with? I understand that the draft is a thing, but if you're going to move out a player like Brandon Brooks, you better have a guy in mind to replace him. Replacing him with a draftee doesn't work for me. Unless you're going to get a day 2 pick for Brooks, I can't endorse the idea of trading him. Speaking of offensive linemen, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL.com, the Bears are going to let Bobby Massie hit free agency. The way his contract is structured is kind of weird. Every year of his contract is basically a team option. So the Bears can cut him, and yes, they'll be hit with dead money, but it's not a gargantuan amount of dead money. They'll have $3.9 mil on the books if they cut him, and they'll save $5.4 mil. That'll get him within $1.5 million of the salary cap. Yeah, the Bears aren't in a great salary cap position. They're not in an awful cap position, but they're not in a great cap position. I will say, though, I don't like the idea of cutting Massie. I understand that he only played in basically 7 games last year. Week 8 against the Saints, he only played 4 snaps. That was it. But in those games, he had a 72.6 overall grade. That was the best grade of his career. I can't endorse cutting a good offensive lineman. If you're in cap hell, I'd understand it. But the Bears aren't in cap hell. They're in cap purgatory. They're not beholden to cutting one overpaid player. They can cut smaller players. And they'll be fine. I'll have a tough time getting behind this. I'll say this. I wouldn't mind Massie on the Jets. He's much better than George Fant. Moving on now to the Seahawks cutting Carlos Dunlap. And I don't mind this move at all. Dunlap took a major step backwards last year. In 2019, he had an 89.7 overall grade. You know what his grade was last year? 60.3. that was by far and away the lowest grade of his career. I mean, he's 32 years old. He's not getting any younger. Cutting him saves the Seahawks over $14 million. It's a no-brainer for the Seahawks to cut him. It would be nice if he went back to the Bengals on a one-year deal and retired with them. But I don't know if that's in the cards. The Bengals may want to go younger. They do have the cap room for it, though. I'll say that. They have over $40 million in cap room. This move makes perfect sense for the Seahawks. I do want to talk about the really sad death of Mark Pavelich, whose death was announced on Friday. He died on Thursday at the age of 63. When you think of the Miracle on Ice team, who do you think of? Micah Hyde, Jim Craig, Herb Brooks, Ken Morrow, and Neil Broughton, right? It'd take you a while to get to Pavelich. And that's a shame, because Pavelich was an integral part of that team. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole backstory of The Miracle on Ice. The movie Miracle with Kurt Russell, the best hockey movie ever made, does a much better job of that than I ever could. The one thing I'll say is, in the game against the USSR, Pavelich had 2 assists. The first assist came on the first U.S. goal that was scored by Buzz Schneider. And the second assist came on the eventual game-winning goal by Micah Hyde, assisted by Pavelich and John Harrington. Incredibly, Pavelich went undrafted in the 1980 draft. He started out his professional career in Switzerland. Absolutely dominated for HC Lugano. After that year, Herb Brooks took over as head coach of the Rangers. One of the first things that Brooks and Craig Patrick, who was also with the Miracle on Ice team as their assistant GM and assistant coach, later on he became Rangers GM, did was bring Pavelich stateside. He immediately dominated with the Rangers. His rookie year, he had 76 points in 79 games. He still holds the record for most points by a Rangers rookie. With Brooks as head coach, Pavelich thrived. The Rangers were in the playoffs every year. Pavelich was a point-a-game player in the regular season and in the playoffs. It looked like he was going to be a great Ranger for years to come. Then in the 84-85 season, Brooks was fired. The Rangers finished that season 26-44-10. The only reason they made the playoffs was because the Devils and Penguins were absolutely atrocious that year. The Rangers absolutely backed into the playoffs. They got swept by the Flyers. Craig Patrick coached the final 35 games for the Rangers that year, and their 3 playoff games. It was a disastrous season. The Rangers hired Ted Sater to take over as coach. Sater was a terrible coach, put an emphasis on skill above all else, dump and chase, and then forecheck. It didn't suit Pavelich. Pavelich didn't like Sater. Sater didn't like Pavelich. Pavelich was still good that year. He had 40 points in 59 games. But that really spelled the end of his time in the NHL. He played 12 games for the North Stars. He reunited with Brooks. Then in 91-92, he played 2 games for the Sharks. With the North Stars, he had 10 points, and with the Sharks, he had an assist. So, Pavelich could get points. Very, very underrated player. And I didn't know this. Thank you, Wikipedia. Pavelich actually got an assist on the first ever goal in San Jose Sharks history. The goal was scored by Craig Cox. The last guy on earth you'd expect to score that goal. Cox was an enforcer. After hockey, Pavelich had a really rough life. It's really sad. In 2012, his wife fell out of a second-story balcony and died. It was completely accidental. In 2014, he had to sell his gold medal. In 2019, he was arrested, had a violent outburst with someone. It was probably due to his CTE, which he did have. There's no question about that. He spent his last days in mental health hospitals. That's where he died. He didn't even die at home. He died at a mental health hospital. Now, Barry Beck was the captain of all the Rangers teams that Pavelich played for. Beck and Pavelich were very close. Beck wrote a lengthy Facebook post over the weekend, absolutely ripping the Rangers, the league, and U.S. hockey for not doing more to support Pavelich. Now, I can't speak with great specificity on what the Rangers, the NHL, and U.S. hockey actually did. If we take Beck's post at face value, they did nothing. And that's terrible. Because Pavelich deserved to be taken care of. Not because he won a gold medal, and because he was a point-a-game player once upon a time, but because it's clear he was going through a cognitive decline and he needed help. It's tough for me to blame anyone for what happened to Pavelich. It's a terrible end There's no question. No one deserves that. At least now, we can take comfort in the fact that he's not suffering anymore. May he rest in peace. New York Islanders show comes your way tonight. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. That is, of course, excluding next week, where there will be some revisions to the schedule. Listen to the end of Friday's show for specifics on that. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that a lot of long relievers are ashamed to tell their parents exactly what they do. The only nice thing about it is that they get to wear a uniform like everyone else.